Hi, this is Dr. Adam Weiss in our Research Methods course, and today we are going to talk about qualitative research. So, in the first optional Zoom meeting in our first class, we talked about the difference between qualitative and quantitative research, and we kind of gave an overview between the two. Well, since our first project is going to be qualitative research, I'm going to go into a little bit more depth on what exactly is qualitative research. So let's talk about some of the key elements of qualitative research. So first of all, qualitative research occurs as much as possible in the natural environment that you're studying. So if you're examining a school district, teachers, you would probably conduct your research within that school. Or if you were examining a particular community or organization, same thing, you would be conducting your research at that as much as possible in the natural environment so that you would get authentic types of interactions either in the answers to your interview questions or if you were doing, which we'll talk about in a second, but document analysis or observations of the organization, then you would want to be in that natural setting. A second thing that's important about qualitative research that kind of makes it unique and different than quantitative research is that the researchers have the key role in data collection. Quantitative research, on the other hand, you could have scientific experiments or you could do statistical analysis of data, and so the researcher doesn't always have a direct role in collecting the data. But in qualitative research, which we're talking about today, the researcher does have a direct role. They're the ones, and especially in our case, we're going to be the ones conducting the interviews, asking the questions, recording the answers from our participants, and then analyzing the results. So the researcher in qualitative research has much more active role. A third thing that's interesting or unique about qualitative research is that the most effective qualitative research has several different forms of data collection, whereas quantitative research can get away with just doing one experiment or one survey. The best qualitative research has several forms of data collection. Now, for our class, we won't be able to do all of those forms just due to the time limits of our course, but it is good to know that if you were going to do your doctoral work, go into a doctoral program, then you might also engage in these other forms of qualitative data collection. So for our class, we're doing just interview data collection, but there are other forms. So we kind of briefly mentioned it just a couple minutes ago, but you could be having observations of an organization or of an event or of a group of people and their interactions. And with that observation, you would have a formal rubric to almost like a checklist to see if you were seeing the same things or commonalities each time you had the observation. You could also do photo analysis or video analysis, and then you could even analyze the documents from that organization or maybe the physical environment, like posters posted on the walls or any kind of memos or speeches perhaps that were made within that organization. All of that could add to your qualitative analysis. So you could connect what you observed and what you saw in the photos and the videos to what you witnessed or overheard in your interviews. And so we call that in research triangulation. And so your photo analysis should support your analysis of the interviews, and your document analysis should shed further light on also what you found in your interviews. So that's what the ideal form of qualitative research would entail. We won't really have time to do document analysis or formal observations, but I do want to expose you to the idea of what it would look like. So qualitative research also begins with inductive reasoning. So first you do your individual data collection, do your interviews, and then you form a general conclusion. It's the opposite of quantitative research, where the quantitative research is almost like a scientific experiment. It follows almost the scientific method. You start out with a hypothesis, and you're trying to test whether or not this hypothesis can explain the relationship. Well, with qualitative research, which is what we're doing first in our course, it's the opposite. You are kind of coming in with a blank slate, with an open mind. You're observing what occurs during the interviews, and then you're forming your own conclusions based off of the interview data. So another thing to think about is qualitative research is all from the perspective of the participant. Your key focus of analysis is what your participants are thinking. So later when we talk about how to create a qualitative research question, you want to think about your population are the people you're going to be interviewing. So the population of your study, and from their perspective, is how you're going to analyze this phenomenon or this relationship or this organization. So qualitative methods also has something unique in that it follows emergent design. So emergent design is just a fancy way of saying that you can modify the design of your study as you go, based on what you realize are needs. So if you were conducting your interviews and you noticed that one question was confusing to participants, or you realized that you had left out some questions, and maybe your participants had kind of brought it up inadvertently, and then you realized I need to really kind of touch on this topic in more detail. So you can add to your interview protocol, which are the questions you ask during your interview, even after you've started conducting the initial interviews. And that's okay, because qualitative research is not as rigid as quantitative research. It's not as set in stone. You can modify based on the needs that you see. A seventh thing that you'll think of that you should know about qualitative research is that as the researcher, you're spending a lot of time doing reflection, and you're actually going to write down that reflection in your paper. So you'll be reflecting on how your personal background, your experiences, your upbringing, your characteristics, your race, your gender, your sexuality, your political beliefs, how all of that could influence the way you interpret what someone else is saying. You're not collecting this data with a scientific instrument. You're collecting it through listening. So when you hear that information, what you're getting, what the answers from your participants during the interview, you are making sense of it on your own. And the way you're making sense of it is bringing it back to your own reality and your own perspectives and experiences. So you, unfortunately, can alter the data analysis, because if you have a really strong perspective, a really strong bias toward one way or the other, that could influence your interpretation of what the participant is saying. So when we conduct qualitative research, we reflect on that. We reflect on how our own personal experiences could influence the conclusions that we make in our data analysis. And then another thing about qualitative research is that it focuses on a holistic focus and comprehensive focus. You're trying to understand this event, this group of people, this organization, this phenomenon, this situation, this relationship fully and from all different points of view, all different perspectives. You're not narrowing your focus, really. You're actually starting very broad to try to really fully study this phenomenon as much as possible. It's not like quantitative research where you might focus on one particular element, one particular relationship, and make a hypothesis about that relationship and just study and examine that one relationship. In qualitative research, you're really trying to get a whole understanding of whatever you're studying. So there's different types of qualitative research. I'm going to go briefly through them just for time's sake. We are going to not be doing all of these, so the ones we aren't going to be doing in our class, I'm just going to briefly mention. So the first one we are not going to be doing in our class, it's narrative research, but I do want to just let you know what it means. It's primarily used in like ethnographic research and cultural anthropology or sociology. And this would be when you are having the participant tell basically their life story and give like a narrative of what happened over time. And then you are kind of you're almost looking at cause and effect relationships to see how participants changed over time. The second type of research which we will be doing in our class is phenomenological research. Phenomenological research is where you're trying to hear from different points of view, different individuals, hear diverse perspectives, and then try to hear and understand a particular context or situation or phenomenon to the best of your ability. So you're trying to hear so many different points of views and from all different groups of people so that you can finally make, the most informative sense of what happened to most effectively portray that issue. So not providing several points of view to show the issue from different perspectives. And this type of research uses interviews. The next type of research, grounded theory, is a form of qualitative research. We won't be doing it as much. We might use an element of it in that you can choose to, once you get your interview data, you might form some conclusions to explain why you think something happened or why these relationships exist. But we won't really fully go through the grounded theory process because we are not going to be collecting a variety of data. We're only collecting interview data. You could form a theory of why something happened during your interviews or why people answered a certain way, but we're not going to fully go through the grounded theory process. And then an ethnography would be when you're studying one particular culture or group and you're embedding yourself in that community. That's popular in sociology and cultural anthropology. We won't have time to do that for our class. Then a case study would be when you're focusing on one particular organization or relationship, and then you're studying them over time, over years, and then noticing how they change over time. And so since we're not going to be studying something for so long, we won't be doing a case study. So you reflect. We mentioned how it's important that the researcher reflect on their role in the research for qualitative research because they play such a pivotal role. And so you'll reflect in 3 different parts of your paper, and your reflection will be how does your own personal background influence the way you interpret what your participants said in the interviews. And so you'll reflect at the beginning of your paper in the introduction because you'll reflect on why is this topic interesting to you? What part of your background or your prior experience made you want to research this topic? Then when you get to your theoretical framework, which is also kind of toward the beginning part of your paper, you're going to discuss how your prior experiences helped you choose a particular theory to employ throughout your research when you collected your data. So why did you choose this theory to understand this situation or this phenomenon or this group of people? And then finally, in the discussion section, you're going to really get into detail about how your interpretations, your conclusions are largely based, or at least partially based, on your own personal experiences, your own upbringing, your own socioeconomic background, your race, your gender, etc. And so how that could influence your interpretation of what people think. So we'll be talking about sampling throughout this unit, and so you can look at our recording of our optional Zoom meeting to get a little bit better idea of sampling, the different sampling procedures. But qualitative research will often use non-randomized or non-probability purposive sampling. You're going to purposely pick people you think who are influential members within a community or a group and who are experts on the topic or who have an important point of view to interview. So a lot of times you'll know the people you interview. You're not going to just randomly pick people from a list of numbers or a list of names. You're going to have a good idea of who do you think and purposely choose people that you think would be experts and give you the best information. You want to, if as much as possible, get from multiple points of view, but you do want to choose your participants wisely. And so in qualitative research, it doesn't have to be a random sample. It can be people you know who are important, who you want to hear their perspective on this event. So when we do our data collection, you'll first, before you actually do your interviews, you'll create an interview protocol, which are the specific questions you will ask during your qualitative research, and we'll talk about that in 2 weeks, how to create a good interview protocol. And then, of course, when you're doing your interviews, you should record, and then there's different software, or you could transcribe it yourself by hand. But transcription of what was stated in the interview helps you to do your data analysis. And then if you were doing observations, you would have, like I mentioned earlier, a rubric. So you could have kind of a standardized way to look at what was observed. And then same thing with like video analysis, picture analysis. You would have some kind of rubric, some formalized way to analyze it. But we won't be doing that in this class, so you don't have to worry about it too much. All right, well, thank you. I appreciate your time, and stick tuned for the next topic.